Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern to contemplate what the hell's happening with Bitcoin right now. And it's just, I mean, I don't know where to begin with this, Steve, but, you know, they keep talking about bubbles. It looks like one, but it's also a bit of a Wild West type of investment, I guess, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, you and I spoke about Bitcoin back in, 2012 and 2013, and probably should have bought some then. But anyway, I'm moving on. I'm all right.
But isn't that the nature of, I mean, before we talk more about Bitcoin, if you're talking about investments, it's always easy to say after the fact, that something was a good deal. I would have thought something like this, and, there's stories coming out now of, people becoming millionaires out of the fact that they were sitting on, a couple of Bitcoin, a treasure trove of Bitcoins on their computer and they didn't do anything with them for like 5 years. And that, now they're millionaires or whatever. Assuming, of course, that they actually sold them.
There's lots of good stories like that. I don't know how many of them are actually real. But anyway.
But you can imagine at least a couple would be. To me, that doesn't seem like smart investing necessarily. It's just a lot of those would be luck. And the Winklevoss twins story of their initial $11 million investment from the proceeds of their lawsuit against Facebook, by the way. They invested into Bitcoin and were reportedly sold them for $1 billion just recently. I mean, to me, that doesn't seem like that seems more like luck rather than actual sound investment strategy, if anything.
Well, it's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, if we're going to look at it from that point of view, it's probably people like the Winklevi, as my good friend Zuckerberg refers to them, that are responsible for actually making it so attractive or such a financial success. They've spent a lot of money and a lot of time in creating exchanges for Bitcoin. So they've created the infrastructure so this can happen. So when we first spoke about, Bitcoin, Mt. Gox was still around.
Yeah.
And we all know how that ended up with people having Bitcoin stolen, et cetera, So they've created a lot of the structure. They've done a lot of the hard work. And so probably what they're actually getting is they're getting a return on investment of their money.
Yeah,
an effort which they put in, which is a bit different to someone who had 100 Bitcoin, like
5 years ago.
5 years ago, and now finds they've hit the jackpot.
Yeah,
it's really interesting though. What we're seeing here is a whole. I mean, not many people really understand Bitcoin. There are some really good blogs that will explain it, but it's getting harder and harder to produce Bitcoin. In fact, all the Bitcoin that's being produced now, I've read somewhere that it's taking more power than Ireland's entire energy consumption each year now to generate, additional Bitcoins. And there'll only be a finite number of Bitcoins as well. But that value only holds up while people are making money from them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to predict a crash, but circumstances can change very rapidly.
Well, there's a couple of points I just wanted to pick up there that you think about .com bubble, all that sort of stuff, where it would seem like this type of thing is everyone's caught on, and that's what's like now we think it's a good thing, and that's what's made it skyrocket. And there probably will be a moment of reckoning coming, which will normalize it, and then you start to get to a point where Bitcoin will probably find its way in the marketplace as something a bit more normal. But at the moment, it's like oh, wow, we've got this, flashy new toy, and that's why it's sort of exploded the way it has. And that's the history of how bubbles have been. I was just rereading about the tulip bubble, from the world's first recorded market bubble. But What's also interesting to me is that this idea that does Bitcoin actually have value? Because it's not as if it's like gold, silver shares. You know, a share is something based on a real company. It's a part of a real company. I can understand that the underlying technology that powers Bitcoin could be quite valuable because you know that's like a mechanism for making all this happen. But do the actual coins themselves have any value? Because
Well,
intrinsically, because what happens if you know, it becomes not hot anymore? You just swap the bitcoins out for something else, but you just use that underlying technology to power it.
no, they actually have value because the cost of power. You have to use energy to generate Bitcoin. So that they do have value. They do have an intrinsic value because for more Bitcoin to be added to the system, there needs to be more computing power, more electricity consumed. So they do have an intrinsic value, but it's just not a physical value. And that's where it gets crazy, doesn't it?
But is that where it could lead to a problem in the marketplace, especially with the prices that Bitcoin's at the moment? That if somebody, or say en masse, the market decides it is of no use to anyone anymore, it's going to lose its value, isn't it? I mean, I would think that that's an extreme outcome. I think Bitcoin's going to be around, but in that scenario, if all support falls from it in the marketplace, where's its value then?
Potentially it could be worth zero.
Yeah.
But if I won't take your seashells, you know, or your diamonds, then they're worth zero as well. So I don't know anymore. We're in a post-truth world. We got Trump as president. You know, even cash, is it worth anything? I don't know. People accept it.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're moving to, is the fact that we're almost going back to a barter system. Yeah. And people are willing to barter for Bitcoin, which is, you know, people willing to exchange cash for Bitcoin. Yeah. It wasn't that long ago when Bitcoin was going through a very sort of dubious phase where people were exchanging stuff for Bitcoin, not necessarily cash. So, I don't know. But I do believe it's got intrinsic value because it takes power to generate the coins.
Yeah.
And if you don't generate the coins, then you can't trade in Bitcoin. So it's kind of tied up in that. Apart from that, I don't really understand it any more deeply.
Well, I mean, you know, we were joking about this before we got on. The whole, you know, the first Bitcoin transaction was the purchase of a pizza, and then that it's now been, you know, the tweet meme that's going around now is, you know, that pizza's now worth, I don't know, $180 million at current prices. But that highlights an interesting conundrum with it as a useful sort of currency to actually use for the exchange of goods and services, because at the moment I don't think it can be used at its current value. It can be used that way because it's going, well, you know, just yesterday, for instance, you know, for it to, the price to fluctuate $5,000 per Bitcoin in the up and down within the same day, you can't rely on that as a at least in that way, but as a speculative asset, you probably could. Because then that's like, I bought it for 20,000 at 8 a.m. and I sold it for 25,000 at midday.
Well, yeah, I think once they open Bitcoin futures, that's when hedge funds move in and they can manipulate the market like they manipulate the share market. So maybe that will cool it down or just make it more volatile. But at the moment, everyone's pouring into Bitcoin to make money on speculation.
Yeah.
Which is, once again, that's like shares, and that's different to a currency. So it has so many, is it a commodity? Is it a currency? Is it a something else? So who knows? I don't know. It's just a new technology as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think, I guess I just want to touch on something the Winklevi mentioned, which was their belief that Bitcoin could become this sort of invisible underlay of currency exchange. So we would see dollars exchanged, but the technology powering that could be Bitcoin. I wasn't quite sure how that would actually work, but it didn't sound, it sounded a bit dubious to me. Like it sounded like, well, I could see maybe the technology powering Bitcoin do that, but not necessarily the Bitcoins themselves.
Yeah, well, that's right. Who knows? Because I guess the reality is that, you know, Bitcoin can be stopped at any time if it's made illegal or the exchanges close, and theoretically a government could, I guess, release their own currency.
Yeah.
Blockchain currency. I don't know what that would do to Bitcoin. I mean, there's two things driving Bitcoin. The first was obviously for all the underworld dealings, you know, untraceable, et cetera, and then the other side of it is now there's you know, big financial players with a lot of money to make, and that's what's happening. So I don't know what will happen, and I wonder. I agree with you. At some stage, there'll be probably some sort of stabilisation of the Bitcoin market. Where the price of Bitcoin is then, who knows? But then it'll find its place. But, you know, as we've seen in the past, any government can regulate against Bitcoin and effectively eliminate it, outlaw it again.
An interesting example of that is the Chinese. They've there's no way to buy or sell Bitcoin in China. But just as a final thing, and I just wanted to touch on the mysterious nature of Bitcoin's founding, because I actually find this fascinating. You know, for all this hoopla around, you know, people buying, selling, making lots of money, and the price skyrocketing and all that, and you go back and you start reading about how this thing started, and it points to a you know, it's got the name of like a Japanese guy's name, but apparently it's not a guy. It might be a group of people that did it, and they're all mysterious, and then there's different people taking credit for inventing the thing, and it just I never quite understood or was able to reconcile why that would have to be the case. If you created something, unless of course there was some sort of shady, you know, sort of reason, I'm just speculating, if there was a shady reason for its creation or for its use that you didn't, or maybe, you know, it might just be a case that this person or group of people are publicity shy and just don't want to highlight, you know, themselves to anyone.
Yeah, look, it's hard to know. There's been a rumour for a long time that the person who actually created Bitcoin was an Australian who used the Japanese pseudonym.
Yeah.
But also, you have to remember that it wasn't released as a currency. It was released as a proof of concept. It was actually an intellectual exercise to see if it could be done. And, you know, for whatever reason, it got popular and people have jumped on board with it. So, you know, it's no different, I guess, in the 60s to something like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones getting unbelievably big. Bitcoin's done it the same way. It's the modern version. But, yeah, who knows why they haven't stepped out of the shadows. You know, there's always a reason, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there, and maybe we'll just you know, head off now, check the Bitcoin price and see if anything can be made from it. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there, and you can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels and all sorts of other things, and we hope you enjoy the content that we have at SciTechCulture.com. So that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.